I think my mother did exactly the right thing. I think it's absolutely extraordinary.
Princess Anne did not raise her voice. She did something far more consequential. As Camilla approached Queen Elizabeth's private library at Windsor, Anne stepped inside, removed the ceremonial key from its cabinet, and locked the door herself. A stunned equerry watched from the corridor as the Princess Royal delivered one uncompromising instruction. Nobody would enter, not even the Queen Consort, until the late monarch's sealed papers had been secured. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The key turned, and the corridor seemed to lose its air. The private library was not an ordinary reading room. It was Elizabeth's protected retreat, holding annotated books, family correspondence, personal records, and sealed cases kept outside normal palace access. The Princess Royal, a title traditionally given to the sovereign's eldest daughter, stood beside the door with the only working key pressed into her palm. Anne had locked the room moments before Camilla's scheduled arrival and ordered the duty officer to refuse everyone until an inventory had been made. Camilla stopped when she saw her. The Queen Consort, meaning the reigning king's wife, rather than a monarch ruling in her own right, had expected a review of the collection. Instead, she faced a locked door and Anne's grief. The brass key had once been carried by her mother, and the princess felt that memory cut through her as footsteps came closer. Still, she did not retreat. "This room is not ready to receive you," Anne said. Camilla's surprise hardened into humiliation, but she held the other woman's gaze. A page on the librarian's desk had changed everything. According to the documented inventory, 3 sealed correspondence cases were scheduled for transfer that morning, yet a handwritten amendment appeared beside the authorization line. Anne did not recognize the writing. She lifted the page, read it again, and tightened her grip on the key. Charles received the call before either woman left the corridor. The king listened as the equerry, a royal officer assigned to personal duties, explained that his sister had secured the library and stopped the transfer. He said nothing for several seconds, then postponed his engagement without explanation. That silence told Anne the danger was real, and it told Camilla that the confrontation had reached the monarch. Camilla turned to leave, then noticed a red index card between Anne's fingers. It carried Elizabeth's cipher, a personal identifying mark used on confidential royal material. The Queen Consort's face changed. This was no longer a dispute about books. The locked door had created the scandal, but her reaction revealed the deeper truth. Everyone there feared what might be waiting behind it. Behind the dispute stood 3 people carrying completely different versions of Queen Elizabeth's legacy. Anne saw a mother whose final boundaries deserved protection. Charles saw a sovereign whose private wishes could destabilize his reign. Camilla saw a closed room that appeared to mark the limit of her acceptance. The library had become more than an inheritance. It was now a judgment, and each of them feared that judgment would fall differently. Anne remained inside after the corridor fell silent. Years earlier, she had entered that same room as a young princess after exhausting public engagements, and found her mother waiting beside the fire, offering neither pity nor empty comfort. Elizabeth had taught her that the sovereign, the king or queen serving as head of state, sometimes survived through silence. Those conversations mattered because they showed the daughter where public duty ended and private pain began. Now the princess sat at the old library table, carrying both. A faded book broke her composure. Anne opened a childhood edition of Black Beauty and discovered her mother's inscription beneath the cover, written in ink softened by time. She traced one line with her finger, then closed the book sharply when grief threatened to overcome discipline. Protecting this room was no longer about furniture or forgotten papers. To the royal daughter, surrendering the key without answers would mean surrendering the final boundary Elizabeth had trusted her to defend. Charles faced a harsher conflict in his study. As king, He controlled household operations, including staff schedules and access arrangements, but his mother's private materials remained protected by written custodial instructions, rules naming who could handle, move, or inspect personal property. The monarch could not dismiss the confrontation as an argument between two women. If he overruled Anne, he might violate Elizabeth's wishes. If he supported his sister, he would deepen Camilla's humiliation. Camilla waited in the adjoining sitting room, staring at the door through which no invitation came. She asked her private secretary, a senior aide responsible for personal correspondence and official planning, whether Anne had intended to embarrass her. Before the aide could answer, the Queen Consort dismissed her. Anger could have been challenged. Silence felt like rejection. Charles studied the documented access schedule and suddenly stopped. Camilla's visit had been added only 48 hours earlier, although the library had remained restricted since Elizabeth's death. No ordinary review explained that urgency. William then received a recorded briefing from the royal archivist. The future king learned that the planned inspection included a cabinet connected to Diana's correspondence. His concern turned personal at once. Those letters could contain memories never intended for competing royal offices. Anne ended the silence with a handwritten message delivered directly to her brother. Charles unfolded it and read 6 words: "Ask who altered mother's transfer order." That sentence forced the king to look backward, toward the private incident that had convinced his sister the library was about to be breached. The confrontation had not begun at the library door. Its true beginning came 11 days earlier, during a private memorial review at Windsor. A red portfolio belonging to Queen Elizabeth was placed before Camilla by mistake. Anne saw the Queen Consort lift its cover, read the first handwritten line, and freeze. No accusation followed that afternoon. Yet from that instant, the Princess Royal began preparing for a move nobody else knew was coming. The room had been quiet until that mistake. The memorial review was a controlled process in which Elizabeth's books and personal possessions were catalogued for preservation, family retention, or future public exhibition. Each object carried a decision, and every decision mattered because private memories could become royal history the moment they left the family's hands. Anne understood that danger. Camilla understood it too. Camilla had barely lifted the cover when Anne crossed the room. The red portfolio carried Elizabeth's personal cipher, a private mark identifying material created or approved by the late monarch. Beneath it stood a restriction declaring that only Anne, Charles, and the appointed royal archivist could open it together. The archivist was the official responsible for protecting and recording historically important royal material. No individual approval was enough. Anne placed one hand over the page and closed the portfolio beneath Camilla's fingers. The Queen Consort stared at her, wounded by the speed and certainty of the gesture. "Do you consider me untrustworthy?" she asked. The princess refused to offer reassurance. She simply returned the file to its case and instructed the librarian to record the mistake. Charles demanded answers that evening. During a recorded private conversation, the king challenged his sister for humiliating his wife in front of household staff. Anne answered that defending their mother's boundaries was not an attack on Camilla. Her words left him trapped between his duty as a brother and his loyalty as a husband. He wanted peace, yet peace now seemed to require ignoring the question nobody dared ask: what had Camilla read? The answer began emerging the following morning. Anne received a documented access request from Camilla's office, seeking independent entry to the library for an estate continuity assessment, a review meant to determine how private possessions should be managed after an owner's death. That request became the exact trigger for locking the room. It arrived too quickly and targeted too precisely. A second documented account deepened her suspicion. The deputy librarian recorded that Camilla had asked whether Elizabeth left personal observations concerning the future queen. Anne immediately understood that someone was searching for a particular letter. Charles finally examined the portfolio's transfer sheet and found one chilling reference: conduct after accession. Accession meant the moment a new monarch formally inherited the crown. His mother had not merely recorded the past. She appeared to have anticipated the conflict now consuming her family. With the trigger exposed and the transfer order compromised, Anne and Camilla could no longer hide behind courtiers. Their next meeting would be face-to-face. Camilla returned to the library corridor before sunset, this time without her private secretary. Anne was waiting beside the locked door, the brass key visible in her hand. There were no cameras, no ceremonial smiles, and no room for another carefully worded postponement. "Give me the key," the Queen Consort said. The Princess Royal looked directly at her and replied, "Tell me first what you expected to find." The narrow east corridor carried every quiet breath between them. Household staff had been dismissed, leaving only a protection officer, a security specialist responsible for guarding members of the royal family, standing too far away to hear clearly. Camilla insisted that her visit concerned preservation duties attached to her position. She said access had already been approved through the king's household, the staff structure that manages the monarch's official and private responsibilities. Anne did not accept the explanation. She placed the brass key on a small side table, yet kept 2 fingers pressed firmly over it. "You requested access to something that belonged privately to my mother," the princess said. "You treated her memory like an institutional asset that could simply be transferred, absorbed, and controlled." Camilla flinched, but she refused to step back. The Queen Consort told Anne that she had spent decades entering rooms where people still remembered another woman. Diana's memory had followed her through ceremonies, family gatherings, and every attempt to build legitimacy beside Charles. Her voice faltered as she looked toward the locked door. "This proves I will never be accepted," she said. "Not by you, perhaps not by any of them." Anne lifted her fingers from the key, only to produce the altered authorization page. The documented request did not target the general book collection or items intended for preservation. It named one cabinet containing Queen Elizabeth's private assessments of senior family members. "Why this cabinet?" the royal daughter demanded. "Why did your office know exactly where to look?" Camilla's silence stretched until anger gave way to fear. She admitted during that private conversation that someone had warned her about a sealed letter, questioning how royal influence should be exercised after Charles's accession. The message might define the limits of her authority and expose private concerns about her role. She wanted to read it first, not to destroy it, she insisted, but to understand whether it could be used against her. Anne stared at her. "Who warned you?" Footsteps interrupted the answer. Charles entered the corridor and stopped when he heard his wife confess that she already knew the letter's reference number. The king's expression changed because that number had never appeared on any approved schedule. Camilla turned toward him, but no explanation came. Anne left the key untouched on the table. Charles now understood that the argument was no longer about whether the library should open. It was about who had quietly reached inside it first. Charles might have been king, but even he could not simply command the library door to open. Queen Elizabeth had created a private custodial safeguard, requiring 3 approvals before her restricted papers could be accessed. One signature belonged to the sovereign, another belonged to the royal archivist, the third belonged to Anne. In that carefully drafted arrangement, the late queen had given her daughter something extraordinary: the power to stop the crown itself. Charles carried the safeguard into his study and closed the door. The custodial instrument was a written agreement separating Elizabeth's personal papers from official state archives, which hold records created through government and royal duties. It demanded joint authorization before any restricted item could be inspected, transferred, or destroyed. Anne did not own the collection, but her position as personal custodian allowed her to suspend access whenever an inventory or signature appeared compromised. The king read every clause twice. He removed his glasses and placed them beside the document without speaking. His mother had not forgotten to grant him complete authority. She had deliberately withheld it. That realization struck deeply, because Elizabeth had trusted her successor with the monarchy, yet she had trusted her daughter to prevent royal power from entering the most private corners of her life. William entered after receiving a direct summons. The prince listened as his father considered overruling Anne through a household command. "If you force that door open," he said quietly, "the monarchy will look frightened of grandmother's own words." Charles bristled at the warning. Then he saw what his son was doing. The future king was not challenging him. He was protecting him from a decision that could turn private suspicion into a public crisis. The archivist soon delivered a documented security report. It confirmed that the sealed letter's reference number had been copied during the memorial review. A staff access log, a timed record showing who entered a restricted area, placed one member of Camilla's office beside the portfolio cabinet for 7 unexplained minutes. The discovery did not prove theft, but it destroyed any suggestion that the number had surfaced by accident. Anne faced the final instruction alone. She opened a sealed envelope addressed personally to her and found a written order in Elizabeth's unmistakable hand. It directed the custodian to protect any material capable of being used for leverage within the family, until every interested person had been interviewed separately. The Queen had anticipated not only curiosity, but pressure. Charles made his decision. Acting under that instruction, the monarch ordered the staff member questioned in a formally recorded interview. Anne approved the inquiry, and William remained beside his father as the first answer arrived. The employee had not acted alone. Elizabeth's safeguard had held, but its consequence was brutal. Someone close to Camilla would now have to explain how forbidden knowledge crossed a locked threshold. By the following morning, the library corridor was empty, but the damage had spread through the royal household. Access cards were suspended. Appointments disappeared from schedules. Staff members who had served together for years stopped speaking freely near open doors. Camilla received the harshest sign of the new reality when her private secretary placed a cancelled authorization before her. She read it twice, folded it precisely, and whispered, "They have shut me out." Charles moved before another request could disappear. The king ordered an internal review, a formal examination conducted inside the royal household, of every application connected to Queen Elizabeth's private collection. Discretionary access, meaning entry granted through personal judgment rather than an automatic right, was suspended for every family office. The decision mattered because it placed Camilla, Anne, William, and even the monarch beneath the same temporary restriction. Anne acted with equal speed. The princess transferred the sealed correspondence cases into the library's reinforced inner cabinet, while the archivist recorded every item by hand. Together, they created a fresh chain of custody, a complete record showing who had handled each case and when. If another reference number escaped, there would be nowhere for the responsible person to hide. Camilla's anger collapsed when she learned that the staff member who obtained the number had been removed from archive-related duties. The Queen Consort understood how the action would appear. Suspension looked like guilt, and guilt inside her office would quickly become suspicion directed at her. She pushed the cancelled authorization away, then pulled it back as if the page itself might still offer an escape. Charles visited his wife without aides present. Camilla asked whether Anne would release the letter, but the king could promise nothing. Then she asked the question he had feared. "Do you believe I intended to suppress it?" His delayed answer wounded her more deeply than an accusation. The monarch reached for her hand, but she withdrew it before he could touch her. The staff member finally spoke during a documented interview. He insisted that nothing had been stolen. Camilla had requested the reference only after receiving a verbal warning from a former courtier. an ex-member of the royal household familiar with Elizabeth's restricted papers. The warning had created fear, and fear had driven the search. The recorded testimony exposed the deeper truth. The sealed instruction concerned neither succession nor Camilla's removal from royal life. It urged the future household to protect Catherine and William from internal rivalry, especially rivalry disguised as service to the crown. The future king heard those words in a private briefing and immediately thought of his wife. Catherine had never asked to be shielded, yet Elizabeth had clearly believed protection would become necessary. William requested a private meeting with Anne that same afternoon. The prince did not intend to demand the letter. He intended to tell his aunt that secrecy was now causing more damage than disclosure. As Camilla confronted isolation and Charles confronted doubt, the decision moved toward the two people Elizabeth's instruction had been written to protect. There were no aides in the room when Anne finally unlocked the inner cabinet. William stood beside her as she removed a cream envelope marked in Queen Elizabeth's hand. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then the Princess Royal admitted what the confrontation had truly cost her. She was not only defending a document, she was terrified that opening it would turn her mother's private fears into weapons against the family she had tried to preserve. Anne surrendered her phone first. William placed his beside it, and both agreed that the letter would never leave the secured library. The document was a personal ethical instruction, meaning it expressed Elizabeth's moral wishes rather than carrying the binding force of a legal decree. No court could enforce it. Yet the late Queen's authority, experience and understanding of family tension gave those pages a power no formal order could easily match. William watched his aunt unfold the letter. The prince told Anne that silence had allowed everyone to imagine the worst. Camilla feared condemnation. Charles feared a challenge to his reign. Staff feared becoming suspects. "Are we protecting grandmother's trust?" he asked carefully. "Or destroying it by refusing to let anyone know what she actually said?" Anne tried to answer, but her composure finally broke. The princess admitted during that private conversation that locking the library had felt like losing her mother again. Elizabeth had trusted her to defend boundaries that death could no longer defend. Yet carrying out that duty had forced the royal daughter to stand against members of the same family her mother had spent decades holding together. The first revelation changed everything. Elizabeth's letter did not condemn Camilla, remove her authority, or accuse her of disloyalty. Instead, it warned every senior royal, a working family member close to the monarch, against using access to the sovereign to weaken the Wales household. That household was the official family office supporting William and Catherine as the next generation of royal leadership. Charles read like a shadow between those lines, because the warning applied to anyone who allowed private rivalry to influence royal decisions. William continued reading until he reached a separate handwritten sentence. Acceptance, Elizabeth had written, could never be forced through title, access, or possession. It had to be earned through restraint. Anne immediately understood that the message was not intended only for Camilla. It was meant for Charles, for the future king, and even for the daughter guarding the key. Anne lowered her eyes. Protection had become suspicion, and suspicion had wounded everyone. William reached across the table and persuaded her to show the complete letter to Charles and Camilla together. The prince believed truth could still succeed, where secrecy had failed. Anne sealed the envelope and turned the key again. This time, she was not closing anyone out. She was carrying her mother's words toward the confrontation that could finally end the fracture. The palace had released no detailed explanation, yet one image came to define the crisis. Princess Anne leaving Windsor with the library key suspended from a dark ribbon around her wrist. By midday, broadcasters were debating whether she had protected Queen Elizabeth's legacy or challenged the present king's household. Outside Windsor Castle, a small crowd gathered beneath the rain, holding photographs of the late queen and repeating the same verdict. Her wishes must matter. The official statement only intensified suspicion. Palace officials confirmed that access to a private collection had been paused during a routine custodial review, a formal check ensuring personal materials remained protected and correctly recorded. The words sounded controlled, almost ordinary. Nothing about the crisis felt ordinary. The public understood that Anne had stopped Camilla from entering a room filled with Elizabeth's private thoughts, and no carefully polished sentence could remove that emotional truth. Debate divided the country within hours. Some believed the princess had fulfilled a daughter's duty by protecting papers never intended for unrestricted access. Others argued that the Queen Consort held a legitimate place within the modern royal household and should not be treated as an intruder. Every argument returned to the same painful conflict. Where did Camilla's official position end? And where did Elizabeth's personal boundary begin? Camilla watched the coverage alone. One commentator described her arrival as an attempt to enter a legacy that had never welcomed her. Another contrasted her determination with Anne's visible grief. The Queen Consort switched off the television before the discussion ended. She had spent years gaining public acceptance, yet one locked door had revived every doubt she believed she had survived. Anne rejected the language of victory. When William told her that supporters were praising her courage, the princess answered that protecting her mother should never require publicly defeating her brother's wife. The prince heard exhaustion beneath her firmness. He reminded his aunt that the joint reading could still prevent the crisis from becoming a permanent wound. The storm reached its sharpest point when the London Chronicle published a front page showing a closed oak door beneath the headline, "Elizabeth's Last Boundary." That single edition turned a private disagreement into a national symbol. The door now represented grief, trust, authority, and the limits even royal power should not cross. Charles finally broke the silence through a broadcaster's documented palace briefing. The king had summoned Anne and Camilla for a joint reading inside the library. He would not impose a settlement before hearing Elizabeth's complete instruction. The announcement meant the monarch had chosen disclosure over force. Rain still covered Windsor when the castle gates closed that evening. Charles entered first. Camilla followed without an aide. Anne came last, carrying the sealed letter, while William remained behind at her request. The public had delivered its judgment on the locked door. Now only Elizabeth's words could determine whether it remained a barrier or became a boundary everyone accepted. Anne unlocked the library for the final meeting and placed the brass key before Charles. Camilla entered without an aide and chose the chair farthest from Queen Elizabeth's desk. The king read his mother's letter aloud from beginning to end. There was no command to exile anyone and no hidden attack. There was something more difficult, a demand that affection never become entitlement, and that royal power never erase personal boundaries. Charles lowered the letter and accepted responsibility. The monarch admitted that the altered access request should never have passed unchecked through his household. Urgency, loyalty, and fear of another family conflict had weakened safeguards created for a reason. His failure mattered because private influence had nearly overpowered written procedure, leaving Elizabeth's papers exposed to the very pressure she had anticipated. Anne answered with equal clarity. The princess confirmed that every restricted document would remain sealed under the original custodial rules. Neither she, the king, Camilla, nor William would receive special access outside the established process. Those rules required joint approval before inspection or transfer, ensuring that family rank could never become a private key. Camilla finally spoke. During that recorded family conversation, the Queen Consort admitted that fear had driven her toward the library. She believed Elizabeth had left a judgment capable of defining her forever, and she wanted to reach it before anyone could turn it into a weapon. "I was afraid of being condemned by someone who was no longer here to explain herself," she said. The confession held no triumph, only exhaustion. Anne did not excuse her own actions. She told Camilla that locking the door had been necessary, but turning protection into punishment had not been. The royal daughter apologized for treating another woman's fear as proof of guilt. She had defended her mother's boundary, yet she had also allowed grief to harden into suspicion. Charles then signed a revised household directive, a binding internal instruction governing royal staff and procedures. The new order removed informal family influence from every future archive request. Each application would be recorded, independently reviewed, and disclosed to all custodians. William would follow the same rules as Camilla. Anne would follow them too. No title would create a hidden route around Elizabeth's wishes. Camilla withdrew her request in writing and asked that the disputed letter remain sealed after the joint reading. Her choice carried the acceptance she had previously tried to obtain through access. She would no longer seek security through possession of the late Queen's private legacy. Anne returned the brass key to its secured cabinet, but remained the designated custodian. The library reopened for preservation work alone. Elizabeth's memory belonged to the monarchy, but her private voice belonged to no individual royal. The crisis ended without exile, triumph, or public humiliation. Anne protected her mother. Camilla confronted the fear beneath her ambition, and Charles placed principle above personal loyalty. When the library door closed again, it was no longer an act of war. It became the family's shared acceptance that even inside a monarchy, love does not grant unlimited access, and respect sometimes begins with a locked door. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.